K&K Boutique is your one-stop shop for all things modest fashion for you and the little lady in your life. They also have designs that you guys can match. Check out their tops, their bottoms, their flowy dresses, all on their website, kkboutique21.com, and use our code HelloAwesome for 15% off.
Treat yourself to the simple goodness of Oneness Essentials, all natural skincare, soaps, and candles. Each product is handmade and created with nourishing ingredients and genuine care. From skin-loving natural soaps and cozy candles, Oneness Essentials brings a little more comfort and kindness to your daily routine. Use code HelloAwesome for 20% off your order today at onenesssoapbiz.com. That's ONESSSOAPBIZ.com.
This episode is sponsored by Ash & Stone, a holistic herbal skincare company created by a certified skincare formulator for you. Whether you struggle with dry skin, acne, or want to refresh, Ash & Stone has you covered. They have moisturizers, cleansers, facial oils, and more. Go to ashandstoneskincare.com and use our code AWESOME15 for 15% off at checkout today. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. JC here. I am with my friend Melody, and we are going to talk all things music. But before we do, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I would love if you can just take some time to share with us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so delighted that you thought of me for your podcast. I have watched what you have done over the years and have admired your desire to follow God's calling in your life. So thank you for having me. My name is Melody Silva. I've been playing the piano for over 30 years. That feels a little unbelievable to say. I graduated from Bible college in Jackson, Mississippi in 2004. And then I worked as a music director in 2 different churches, but the combined time was about 16 years. And I have found a way to understand playing that works for my sleep-deprived, overstressed brain that gives a more pro sound. And when I say pro sound, I'm not saying that in a way that's prideful, but just something that sounds good. We all want to serve the Lord using our gifts in a way that is pleasing to Him, but also sounds good. And I do believe that these are things the Lord has helped me to understand over the years. It's made me a more confident musician, and I love sharing this with women. One of my favorite things is to see that light bulb moment go off when it finally clicks and they understand, oh, wait a second, I can add this to this song and I can do this here. And now I'm seeing women who are really just kind of stepping into what God called them to be. So I have built music departments from the ground up using musicians that had no musical background. And that sounds amazing, but it is not always fun. I remember, and I think I talk a little about this later. Sorry, I'm kind of stumbling over my words right now. I need to slow down. I get a little too excited. I get a little too excited sometimes. But being in a situation where there was no musical, these kids had no musical background, and training a music department from the ground up has taught me a lot of things. So I believe that playing the piano well should be easy to understand and simple to do, and that anyone can learn with the right teacher. So with over 20 years of music ministry, I have seen truly that anyone can learn to play with a pro sound, no matter if you took lessons when you were 5 or you're starting at 35. I know what it's like not to have a teacher close, and I want to make learning to play easy for anyone, anywhere. Alaska, I've had students from Alaska, I've had students from, you name it, anywhere to access. Okay. So pushing through fear and confusion are the keys to loving the way that you play and being confident with the gift that God gave you.
I'm just so excited because it's something that I know I wanted to do more of. I know we talked off air about like I don't play an instrument. I don't, but I do still, praise sing and I worship and you know, uh can write songs because words are my thing. And I grew up with a musician as a father, and like watching him get like he was a bass player and just get
Mm.
lost in like the music and composing songs. I can get that, and I think it's just what's in here needs to come down here. Is
Yes.
sometimes the disconnect for me. So I
That's it
do.
for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
that putting it all together and even understanding it. And when I say I teach pro sounding piano skills to women, it's women who can't spend a lot of time practicing, but they want to sound like they've played for years. I mean, they're playing in church, most of them every Sunday. One lady who messaged me found out on Sunday their piano player was moving next week.
Wow.
And here she was in this position where she had to fill in. And it's kind of a scary thing to be told within a week, okay, you're going to be our new
Terrified.
piano player. Exactly. One lady messaged me that their music director had been given a cancer diagnosis and had passed away within 2 months. And so here they were, not only grieving and mourning, but trying to fill in the gaps of a music department and carry on through all of this, lead the church in worship, lead the church through really a grieving and a mourning process, but also fill in the gaps of singing and playing. There are beginners who want to play for church, but they need help learning the exact piano skills that sound good in church, because you can go online, you can go on YouTube, and you can find playing videos. But how do I translate that to playing in church? And how do I, have a course called Learn to Play by Sunday, because I found women were just desperate. Like, I've got to play this Sunday. I don't have time to watch 10 YouTube videos and discover, how to apply this technique to different songs. I need, like, give me the nitty gritty, show me exactly what to do. And so they might have a little bit of musical knowledge, but they struggle to play through a full service. And then playing spontaneously, like if the worship leader sings a song they don't practice, or trying to follow the spirit, that can be really terrifying. And these women are they work full time. Maybe they have kids and a husband. They care for the responsibilities of their home, like like your Instacart order this morning. Grocery shopping and meal planning, cleaning, laundry, making dinner, paying bills, taking kids to the doctor, taking dogs to the vet. I mean, the list is endless, right? They're usually running on little sleep, little time, and large amounts of stress. So having
Right.
someone to say, hey, this is what you need to learn is so helpful for them, but also it comes out when they're playing in service because they're actually able to play what they've learned.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so exciting. That's so exciting to hear that it is possible because I think it does feel kind of overwhelming. But I want to take us back to Little Melody, to like your childhood, because obviously this stemmed from somewhere. So I want to know, what did your childhood look like and how old were you when you started actually playing the piano?
Yeah, so I was raised in Texas. You might can hear the little drawl in my voice. Both of my parents were sort of musical. My dad had a studio in our home, so we were around music all the time, musicians and singers. My mom played and sang, but she was also a teacher. She was more of the teach piano lessons person. And so I started taking lessons when I was 7 from these little Bastion books. I don't know if anybody has ever taken from those. They're books you get for kids, and they come in different colors depending on, I don't know if it's age or you just start from like level 1, 2, 3. But I took from those, I learned by note. And then I switched to church style music probably around the age of 10, I started getting the bug. I wanted to play in church. And my mom took me as far as she could, but I was exposed to really good music at camp and camp meeting. And I just caught the musical bug. When I lived in Texas, going to senior camp and even the previous camps and camp meetings, we had really good music, really talented church choirs and musicians, and it just inspired me. But there was no one near the small town that I lived in that played like I wanted to sound. I came from a town of, I think, like 1,800 people. So it was far from, larger cities. So there was nobody close. And one year I came home from senior camp and I told my mom, I want to take lessons from the guy that played at senior camp this year. And it happened to be Justin Conway. And we found out he was the dean of music at Texas Bible College at the time. So my mom called and we found out that he was not doing lessons at the time, but somebody named Terry Wilbanks was. So we drove an hour and 15 minutes one way every week to take piano lessons. Now, these lessons really shaped my playing style today. I have a lot of Terry Wilbanks in my playing. And I remember, excuse me, I remember coming home from my first lesson that he taught me. And he taught me, Oh, How I Love Jesus, but it's like you've never heard it before. It's like the Take It to Church version of Oh, How I Love Jesus.
I love that song.
Yes. And I had recorded my lesson I had a little shoebox tape recorder. You remember those?
Yep.
And so I'm standing at my keyboard in my bedroom playing that tape and writing down notes. And I was so excited that I learned to play that song exactly how he played it in every key on the piano. And that was the beginning, really, of my my playing journey shift to where I started really loving playing for church and diving deep into making songs sound churchy.
Yeah. I love that. Because we all have to start somewhere. And
Mhm.
just practicing and keep trying and keep showing up and keep doing. And also just being okay with being a beginner, which is something that I talk a lot about on here. I think that's probably the hardest part is the mental block. And that's probably why it is kind of easier to start when you are a kid, because some of those mental things are not as heavy as like when you're an adult. Not saying that they're not there, but it's just different. Um, but some people may look at the piano as like, oh, it's another instrument on the platform, like it's just another thing up there. But I want to know, like, what do you see it as?
So I play piano and organ, and actually, organ is my preferred instrument, which I don't get to
Okay.
play a whole lot.
Yeah.
In most services that I've noticed, piano is usually the lead instrument, meaning that you have to know the songs and the intros to play in service. Now, sometimes other instruments will follow you. I've even played with musicians who could kind of get away with not practicing sometimes because they were going to follow the piano player. But everything depends on the piano player in most settings being ready to play. So I feel like, and I would have to talk to other musicians, but just from my experience, I feel like there's more of a higher pressure that's on piano players. And so finding the balance between being prepared to play and ready to play, but also remembering that the piano is part of your worship. You're using it to lead people into worship. Can be a little challenging to balance both of those. But in most churches, I have seen that the piano is the instrument that does carry the worship service.
Yeah, it really does. I know that even when COVID was here, 2020 was here, and we weren't really meeting, or you didn't have a sound system. You had a piano at home, you would just live stream from Zoom and just play that piano, and that would be the worship. I know that my friend Renee, who also is our pastor's wife, she would pull out the keyboard that she had at home and she would put it on a stand I'm like, well, this is what we do. It does kind of it does lead the service, and it changes the atmosphere, I think, when you do have a piano, um, especially when you have a good piano player. People do notice when you don't have a good piano player. Um, but as I think true, it's an extension of your worship. It's an extension of you praising the Lord with the instrument. You're using it to glorify God. And we don't have we're very stripped down at our church. We have a piano and drums, and then we might have trumpet from Brother Lou if he wants to play that day. But so we're a very very small church, and there's something about just being led by whoever is playing the piano. Um, I think it's such an important aspect if we could have that, or an organ. I do think it does change the atmosphere. When people hear the piano, they're like, oh, service is starting. Like, we're kind of like sheep in that way of like, oh, let's all kind of file in, stop our chats, leave the fellowship hall. I hear her playing the piano. That means service is going to start soon. So we all need to file in. I remember that was something like coming back from COVID of like, changing our like structure, because obviously, like church, we have schedules and we have different things that we like to do. And so I remember talking about a group of us. We were talking about just start playing the piano softly, and it'll try and maybe lure everybody to come into the sanctuary. Come on, everybody, we're about to come before the Lord together. I think there is something special about that. So, how old were you when you started like teaching others how to play piano? Was that something that you ever thought you would do? And and what has that taught you about teaching in general?
I was, I don't know that I remember how old I was when I started teaching. I was in my teens. I know I taught piano some summers between school when I was home from college. But now teaching women, there are several things I take into consideration when coaching women. I really feel like the Lord has shifted my understanding and mindset for coaching women in the last several years. Especially in some of the courses I have, being able to speak to them face to face and see and understand what their real struggles are. Because I think sometimes there are things that women don't realize affect how they learn and play. And when you don't use these to guide your practice time and your playing journey, you can burn out really quick. I hear of a lot of women. I used to play. I took lessons when I was a kid, but when we don't use the right things to guide our playing journey, it's almost impossible to keep up, especially with the list of things I was talking about earlier. Just life is just busy and can be overwhelming, and your bandwidth, talk a lot about bandwidth. Your bandwidth can be very limited some days, and you have to learn to recognize that. So this is why there are so many women who just quit playing and will say things like, well, I'm just too old. I'm going to let the younger generation do it. It's like, sister, you're 30. That's not old. That's not the age of retirement in the kingdom. So one of the things that I talk to women a lot about is your current bandwidth. What do you currently have the capacity for? My bandwidth right now is completely different than it was 2 years ago when I was taking care of my dad. I felt like when he was sick, I was basically keeping him alive. And then when he went into the hospital, I stayed in the hospital with him for the 5 weeks he was there. I did not leave at all, because I wanted to make sure that he came out of the hospital okay. And that was my primary responsibility. So during that 5 week period, I didn't have a keyboard. Actually, I take that back. There was a nurse in the hospital that brought me this little battery operated keyboard that I would tinker around on some. But as far as like sitting down and really being able to practice, I didn't have the bandwidth for it. I mean, there were doctors coming in every 2 or 3 hours. And then in between that time, there's nurses and tests, and then you're trying to do research. So you have to understand what season that you're in. And I know people can say, oh, that's cliche to talk about seasons. That's so 2010. But it's something that you have to be aware of. You have to know, are you in a season of transition? Have you recently moved? I've had women in my coaching group, and we've talked about them. Some of them recently got married, some of them recently moved, and understanding the transition period from just moving, okay, and what it does to your brain. When you have to GPS where the gas station is and the grocery store, because you moved to a city of 500,000 people.
Right.
And like me, I was raised in a city of 1,800 people, and there's one road. You don't get lost because there's one road in and out of town. If you blink, you'll miss it. And these things can take up your bandwidth. Has there been a big life change? Have you experienced devastating loss? Are you a caretaker of littles or aging adults? Do you feel overwhelmed and stressed most days? That is going to affect your ability to learn. That's going to affect what you need to learn. What's your schedule like? If you're out of the house at 7 a.m. and home at 9 p.m., what you learn in your practice time is going to need to be tailored to that. And that's not something we've talked about before. In the past, it's been, we do weekly 30-minute lessons, and I'm going to pour out everything I can in 30 minutes, and then you're going to go home and learn it in a week. And then when we can't do that, we think the answer is to quit. So if the laundry is piling up and the sink is full of dishes, it's hard for most women to justify, especially me, to take the time to sit down and play. But also, studies have shown that women cannot relax if there's visual clutter. So we're sort of, in some ways, fighting the creation. Lord, why did you make us this way? We're very detail oriented. That's what we're good at. We notice all the things. We see all the things. That's how the Lord made us.
Right.
And he did it on purpose. He knew what he was doing. But you have to understand this will affect your ability to focus and learn. A study done at UCLA found that women who describe their homes as cluttered or unfinished have significantly higher levels of cortisol, which means you're stressed. And I try not to laugh at that because oh man, that's me. I'm thinking about, can we just please hang those curtains? What will give you the quickest benefit in playing for church? So that's something you also have to consider. What will change your playing the fastest? And I'm going to tell you a story. My husband mentored this boy from a young age. He's now a grown man and is getting married, but he went to CLC Bible College. And he came home and he was at our house and he was just tinkering on the piano. And I walked over to where he was, and he was playing everything, I believe, in root inversion, which is how I grew up learning. And it's probably how a lot of people learn to play, just the basic, very basic start of piano, I guess. And the more I was watching him, I thought, man, I know that's how lesson 1 says to play, but it's really learning the hard way. Now, where did this come from? I believe it came from God. It didn't come from me. And so I sat down at the piano and I showed him a little trick on how to play this song. And he looked at me, he said, "That's it?" And I was like, aha, yes, that's what we're looking for. And I was like, yeah, that's it. So I started teaching this same principle in my lessons, and I called it Learn to Play by Sunday. And it felt so silly to even say Learn to Play by Sunday, but it was so simple. The concept was so simple. And women started messaging me saying, thank you for teaching this, because it has taken pressure off of me to play for Sunday, because there is a pressure that you feel because you're doing something that's sacred when you play on Sundays, and not just Sundays, but when you play for church. And so taking some of the pressure off of, I don't have the ability to play these songs. Now we have the skills to play them. And so we can do things like worship, or we can learn more songs, or not feel so stressed about playing. So I remember when I was younger, we used to go to music conferences and come home with pages of piano tricks. You know, you go to the piano one class, or you go to the advanced piano class, or the organ class. And I remember bringing those home and usually not even completely learning what was on page one. You know, you kind of skip through the first week after music conference, learn a
Right.
couple tricks. Maybe week two, you're still on it. Week three, wait, where is that paper? And you never see it again. You don't know where it is. The pamphlets get lost in the house.
No, it's
Or
hard to
we
keep
learn,
track of.
absolutely. Or we learn a song on YouTube that sounds really cool. And you might
Yeah.
can sit down and play that song. It's like, wow, that sounds amazing. Can you play? Nope. Can't play another song. Don't ask. That's the one
No.
I know.
That's the one I learned. The only one.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's in this key,
Right.
um, which is completely fine. You know, I'm not saying those things are bad, but for women who play in church, they need the consistency across their playing. So learning to play one song doesn't develop a sound where you can just sit down and play anything. So they play some songs really well, but really struggle to play other songs. And I have found that for women, when I we can really hone in on what they need to learn and focus on that thing and then apply it, show them how to apply it to every song they know, that is when they start changing the way they play, changing their entire sound. Now every song you play starts sounding better. And I'm weird. As a leader, I like to put myself in the shoes of the people I'm leading. I've always been that way. When I was the music
Mhm.
director, I'm going to run sound at some point. I'm going to run media. I'm going to sing alto. I would play the drums if they would let me. I want to put myself in every situation because I want to see sometimes, like I remember singing on the praise team one time and I thought, you cannot hear up here. And it helped me realize that sometimes when the singers were off key or they were a little slow on their tempo or they just weren't singing loud, it's because they couldn't hear. I wouldn't have known that before because
Right.
I think them just being up there for years, they didn't realize they couldn't hear. So I say all that to say I started taking weekly piano lessons. This was probably about a year ago from a amazingly talented teacher. Okay, he's it had nothing to do with him at all because he really tried to help me. But it was a 30-minute lesson every week. Okay. Now, mind you, I'm a piano coach full time. This is what I do as my job. So, first week, he taught me something. You know, I came back, I played it fine the next week, but I was really trying to apply what I teach my students, and that's taking what you know, apply it to different songs, apply it in mini keys so it becomes a part of your playing. So as the weeks went by, he was teaching me more songs. I started getting behind. I couldn't keep up. And I realized that at my stage in life and what I was pouring out with the time that I had, what benefited me the most was being able to learn that little puzzle piece that finished the puzzle. If you're giving me a new puzzle every week, they're all going to be mixed up. At some
Yeah.
point, they're going to be in a gallon size freezer bag, and you know
Right.
it's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
But that one little puzzle piece finished this. You know, say it was a gospel style hymn I was trying to play, throwback songs, and I needed to learn this specific trick in order to really hone in on that. That was allowing me to change my playing because learning different songs every week wasn't changing my playing. I was just learning those songs. So I came out of that experience again more than ever determined to help women because I felt that feeling again. I felt that feeling of frustration. I felt that feeling of overwhelm. I felt that feeling of, am I cut out for this?
Right.
Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Because it doesn't feel like I am. It feels like I'm
Mm-hmm.
behind and I'm failing.
Yeah. No, I really like the way you said that because I homeschool my kids. And so when you were explaining that, it kind of reminds me of the challenges that I see just teaching anything. to somebody is you can't just teach them something to pass the test. I'm always
Right.
trying to show them, no, you have to learn this pattern or this formula because because then you could do anything. If you know
Mhm.
this pattern in the formula, then you can just plug in whatever numbers you need because you already have the pattern in the formula. Rather than
Mhm.
trying to teach a huge concept so that they can answer a couple questions right on a test. Then they
Mhm.
finish the test, and guess what? The information finishes out of their brain. The moment they're done with the test, they don't even remember what they learned, which
Mhm.
is going to happen anyway. Um, but I just remember even different teachers that I have had. Like, for example, I did not like math, but I realized I didn't like math because I didn't have a teacher that taught me how to understand math. And then
Mhm.
when I had a teacher who actually not just gave us homework, but the next day she would have us we check to see, okay, you have the homework. She would go through every single problem on the board that was on her homework. So it was like opening up my brain to like a part of me that was always there, but like dormant. And so
Mhm.
that's what I kind of hear you say is the way you approach, teaching piano is not just bringing like this big chunk, like this big puzzle every single week and having them learn this big puzzle, but showing them like the overall, this is just a small piece of the overarching puzzle, of the bigger puzzle, whatever that may be. Um,
Yeah, because you can teach from the perspective of showing people everything you know,
mhm.
which is fine, or you can teach from the perspective of how can I meet you where you are so your playing can actually change. And I've taken from both styles of teachers. And when you show me everything you know, I mean, I'm inspired, but also when I walk out of the lesson, I want to cry because
Yes.
how do I do this? Like, I don't even understand what you just did. Like, yes, it was the piano, but it was like a different language.
Right.
And so being able to say, um, I even broke down in one of my coaching classes, it was this week, um, showing showing my students exactly what these quote unquote pro musicians are playing in live services. I want you to hear what this piano player is doing. They're not doing fancy stuff. They're playing very basic. We're talking major and minor chords. Can you play sevenths, ninths, 11th, 13th? Yes, but that is not what is going to make your playing just sound amazing. There's more technique, there's flow, there's playing your whole keyboard, there's mixing up your inversions, not playing an entire song in rooted inversion. There's so many steps before you get that really lay the foundation for those 13 chords sounding amazing, that if you skip over those, it just keeps you frustrated.
Right. That does make a lot of sense. And when you can learn just how to do things well, when you learn the simple things well, you're able to also be present because you are praising the Lord, right? You're worshiping the Lord. You're playing, for church, but you're also playing for the Lord. And so I wanted to know, like, as a musician for you, what is it like to praise the Lord while also playing during a service? I've talked to musicians about this, about we're singing and not just singing for the congregation, but also at the same time you're praising the Lord at the same time. Is it challenging? How do you navigate that?
So something just came to mind when you were talking that I did not put in my notes. But when we talk about singing for the congregation versus singing for the Lord, I think some of that can be um, practical because I believe that when we don't invest in our gift enough, we sort of get hyper focused on our gift instead of the act of giving the gift, you know? So it's like if you're giving a gift to someone on Christmas, but you know that you've re-gifted that gift, you might be hyper aware of how they receive it. But if you know that you went to Macy's and you spent $50 on this gift and it's something that they want and you give it to them, You're not necessarily worried about their response. You're not even probably worried about, what color the gift wrap is, but you're excited about the gift because you know it's something that they want. And our playing is the same way. If you know and understand how to play in a way that's confident and you can sound, and when I say that confident and sounding good, I don't want people to think that that's prideful. That's stewarding the gift that God gave us. He gave us the gift of playing and singing. So stewarding that is taking the time to practice to make it sound good. Because if I'm making mistakes all over the place, can the Spirit of the Lord move? He can do anything. But more times than not, I have seen mistakes in trying to fake it so you make it hinder a service than help a service. So there is a powerful dynamic that happens when you worship while you play, and being able to worship while you play comes with being confident in your playing, and your playing doesn't have to be the best. You don't have to be at a level of someone else that you admire. You just have to play your best. And then you're pouring out your gift to the one who gave it to you. So when I'm playing, I will often lift my hand. It's usually my left hand because my right hand has to keep playing in order for sound to come out. Sometimes I will stand and jump because I do sit and play at the piano, or I'll close my eyes and let the tears flow. But that is coming from years of being at the piano, being able to play with your eyes closed. You can probably only do that if you practice, if you're really comfortable with your instrument. We also have to remember that playing is worship. Now, I'm not saying that when you're at the piano, you just play and that you never can express worship in a different way. But 2 Chronicles 5:13-14 says, "It came even to pass, as the trumpeters and singers were as one, to make one sound to be heard in praise and thanksgiving to the Lord, when they lifted up their voice with the trumpets and cymbals and instruments of music and praised the Lord." And I'm going to skip a little bit and go to verse 14. It says, "So that the priests could not stand to minister by reason of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord." Playing is worship. So when you build your playing confidence, you can worship. And I would encourage you to build your playing confidence so that you can worship. Sometimes this starts with making playing a part of your worship and devotion time at home. Play through the Sunday set list during your prayer time or when you practice, and be open to worshiping at the same time. Your worship in private will overflow to when you are playing in church, because it just becomes a part of you. So then back to your earlier statement, playing for people or playing for God, then your playing is focused on God because you have spent the time at home developing your skill, developing your craft, and you've also spent time at home worshiping God with your gifts. So when you get behind the piano on Sunday morning, you're not nervous. A lot of times our focus on what will people think, or how will they like how I play, is just nerves. Maybe we're not really prepared like we want to be. And so practice will alleviate that. I think most women struggle with worshiping while they play because they're just trying to make it through the songs. And let me say this, it's not easy for beginner or intermediate musicians to be comfortable playing in church if they're getting the song list on Saturday night or 30 minutes before church starts. That's something that I could pull off, but I've been playing for a very long time. And so I talk a lot to the women I coach about, let's take some pressure off of you, because your ability is at a place and a level where you're really giving your best. And that's what God requires of us, is our best. Playing is a skill that has to be developed, and it does not reflect how spiritual you are. So when you are trying to fake it till you make it through a service, and you want to please God, and you're scared of making mistakes, you're going to be so glued to your chord chart that it's hard to worship. So we talk a lot about, okay, so if I'm getting songs last minute, how do I prepare? Sometimes I'll encourage my students to practice. I call it practice backwards. There's probably a better way to say that. But like, let's say on Sunday, somebody sang a song you never heard before and you totally bombed it because you're trying to learn to play by ear, but we're just not there yet. So here's what we do this week. We're going to practice that song so that next time it comes up, you can play it. So there's different ways that we can alleviate the pressure and be as prepared as possible to follow the Spirit and to play in church.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like you answered the next couple of questions, which is not a bad thing. I think really, the Lord is just kind of flowing in. I think what you said about, just what you are practicing, how you are playing in your private time, it will flow to your public time. And that's devotion and prayer overall. And so you're just including an instrument now. So it's just you're adding it to what you already, hopefully have been doing. And so I do believe like just making sure we're focusing, on the Lord. And then just trying to practice what we can and give ourselves just so much grace. Give ourselves, So that takes us to the next. I did want to know, for me personally, but what advice would you give somebody who wants to start playing piano as an adult? Because I have dabbled, and it's something that I would really like to do more of.
I absolutely love this question because the majority of people that I coach are in this exact same boat. So there are a few things that I would recommend. The first is, remember we talked about bandwidth. I go through this with my students, but you need to decide what your weekly practice time is going to look like and how much time you can realistically have to practice a day. Now, usually when I have new students that come in, they'll say, oh, I can practice an hour. And I'm like, okay, well, let's push the brakes a little bit. Let's look at your life. Let's see what's going on with your calendar. How much are you home this week? What does your schedule look like? I encourage my students to start with practicing 15 minutes, 3 days a week, because it seems very easy. And when you can set a goal that's not hopeful, but it actually feels easy to do, you're more likely to accomplish that, because what we're looking for are not 1 hour sessions every 4 weeks. We're looking for consistency. That's going to make the biggest impact. The next thing is knowing what you're going to practice before you ever sit down. Your bandwidth when you wake up in the morning is at its highest. As you go throughout the day, I don't know the exact number of decisions they say you make a day, but it's a mind-blowing amount of decisions that you make. Okay.
It's always too many.
Yes. It doesn't matter the number. It's always too many.
Yeah.
So having to decide what you're going to play is going to make it harder for you to sit down. So take away those decisions before you practice. Have everything set out and accessible. I do a weekly coaching session with my students where we will sit down and we will talk about their life, what's going on, and exactly what they're going to practice. And I'll make them write it down. This is what you're going to do, in what key. This is the amount of time you're going to spend practicing. And that sounds silly, but if you have that baseline, you can always go over. If you start 15 minutes and you end up practicing an hour, that's amazing. But if you set an hour and you never sit down, then we're back to square one. The next recommendation is don't learn things you won't use in church. And sometimes you don't know what you won't use in church. You need someone to tell you this is what's going to help you actually play and sound good. Because you can sort of get caught in the weeds with music. Music is like a never-ending wealth of knowledge. There's so many avenues you can go with playing. You can play a more contemporary style. You can play gospel. You can add jazzy stuff to your playing. Or you can add these chords or play in these keys, and it just can get really confusing. So you want to make sure you're learning things that will develop your church playing. The next thing is learning to play by number. Learning to play by number is the one greatest secret to helping you play in church, because it will set the foundation for you being able to play spontaneously, being able to follow the Spirit, being able to follow someone and play a song that you've never heard before. It just is the basis for playing, especially in a Spirit-led church. Also, learning your major and minor chords and all of their inversions. I know that sounds a little wah. I wanted something that was a little more inspiring than major and minor chords. But everything that you're going to play that sounds fancy is going to be based off of major and minor chords. I love breaking down tricks that musicians are playing. And I show my students, this is what they're playing: D minor C, D minor C, D minor C. And I see my students look back at me like, again, that's it. Yes, that's it. What you're hearing sounds amazing, but it's just the technique and the way they're playing these minor chords that makes it sound like they're playing something more than they are. Okay, now sometimes they'll have other things mixed in, which I like to talk about as well, but you've got to have your major and minor chords in all inversions. The next thing is knowing all of your scales. Okay, that's the foundation to playing in every key. Being able to play in every key, at least basically, to flow with the Spirit. If you can play the 1, 4, and 5 chord in every key, you can make it through a service. And find a teacher that can make understanding the piano feel simple. This is very important. As a woman who you probably wake up feeling behind and overloaded. So to be able to sit at the piano and feel like, okay, I can do this. I have found for most women, they have felt the desire to play for decades. And it's a heavy burden to carry, to know that God has placed this desire in your heart for decades. And how do I get there? What do I do?
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you're 30, 40, 50, 60, that desire never leaves. I wish I knew how to play. I used to take lessons. I want to learn. So that desire comes from somewhere. God created us to worship Him. And so if you can have someone that says, okay, I see what you're trying to do. We're going to break it down in a way that looks simple. Here's what you play, and here's where you put it. And then you can start adding that to your playing, like I said before. And then all of a sudden you're playing songs, and they all, for example, and this is easy for anyone who doesn't play. In order to play by number, you need to be able to count to 7. Yes, it's that easy.
I can do that.
Easy. Okay, anybody can do that. So then I'm going to show you a trick you can play on the 6 chord. Okay? Which means any song that has a 6 chord in it, which are a lot of the newer modern worship songs, you can plug this in. Now, what I love about that is that even if you don't play the piano, you understood what I just said. Okay? So we've simplified the understanding of playing in a way that anyone can learn to understand it. So now all you have to do is start to apply it, because before, trying to understand piano, like I said, we had sheets of these hieroglyphics and piano tricks and tips, and I couldn't even read what was on there. 5 sharp flat, 9 7, you know what I mean? And much less apply it to the piano. So if it's easy to understand, then it'll be easier to play.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Like you said, just having somebody who can simplify it for you and uncomplicate it. We tend to complicate the uncomplicated. We make things harder for ourselves. And I think sometimes we do think things should be harder. Everything great comes from like grit, right? And yeah, we need to work hard and we need to practice. But I think we kind of forget that not everything that we need to learn is difficult. It's really about the consistency, like you said. To play with confidence is really like showing up and playing, is to keep practicing. And that kind of leads to the next point of how would you encourage a musician right now who's listening, who's just so self-conscious? Maybe they do know how to play. Maybe they're younger, maybe they're older, it doesn't matter, but they're just so self-conscious and they don't think like they're good enough. Like, oh, I'm not good enough to be used on the praise team, on the worship team. What would you say to them?
There's always someone looking up to you, and it's easy for us to pinpoint our own ruts. I have my playing ruts that I play all the time, and I think, oh my goodness, I got to learn something else to play on this sixth chord because this is driving me crazy. Um, and I have sat through services and events where I've heard women play, and I thought, man, they just sound so good. And then to later hear them say that maybe they don't feel like they're good enough. I think we can sometimes be our own worst critics. And I believe there are a lot of women who play better than they realize they play. Because when we talk about how the pros sound and what it means to complement a song or band, I don't know if anyone listening has ever purchased a stem to play with. But if you solo the piano track on a stem, what that piano player is playing is almost nothing.
Mm.
Because they have keyboard, there might be organ, percussion, bass, drums, there might be a couple guitars, some synths. So if we think of music as being 100% and we'll say you have 5 instruments that are playing in a band, each of those instruments is going to play 20%, right? You're not going to play everything you know. That's what makes a song sound good, is everybody's staying in their lane. Nobody's overplaying. They're not playing everything they know in one song. Simple is better. Keys tracks on stems complement the band instead of trying to overplay. So sometimes we think that to sound amazing, we have to do all of these things. And really, we just have to stick with what we know, just play the song well and play it confidently. You can sound pro even as a newbie piano player if you know the right things to play. Now, I talked earlier about training musicians from scratch at my first music director position. What happened is one Sunday or one week, we all of a sudden didn't have musicians anymore. I didn't know what to do. I was 20-year-old, about to graduate Bible college. And I thought, well, how do you make this work? You can't just, always pray a new drummer in, right? So I go up to one of the young people in our church and I said, hey, how'd you like to learn how to play the drums? And he was like, you think I can? I'm like, oh, absolutely. You sure can. And so I worked with him for weeks on playing the drums. And he had some struggles with learning, but we were able to get a solid 4/4 beat down. And he was solid. Like, he played confidently. He didn't speed up or slow down. He sounded good, but it was only 4/4 timing. Okay. I did the same thing with a bass player. And so here we have piano, bass, and drums. We're developing a full band, right? And then we had another lady who played the organ. And we would play with drum loops. And it sounded, because we all played together, we hit the punches together, the chords together, it sounded kind of professional. So we would have guest ministers come in and they would hear the praise and worship, so they'd want to sing a song before they preached. And I would always kind of secretly die inside because I'm like, please don't sing 3/4 timing. Please don't sing 3/4 timing.
Right.
We can't play 3/4 timing.
Right.
But nobody knew our weaknesses because we played what we knew. We played it so well. But it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the most advanced musician in order to sound good, in order to bring your best praise to God. And we need to remember that.
That's so good. And that's so encouraging too. Like you were saying earlier, stewarding the gift well, and you're not gonna, sound 100%, all the time. Nobody is going to show up and sound 100% all the time. And even those that you think sound 100% in their minds, they don't feel that at all. But I appreciate that. I do think that this is really encouraging, and I feel like this taking a lot of pressure off in my mind for me, for myself. Just having the conversation. I think the way you approach it, it's just it's very intentional, and I appreciate that. Um, so where can people find you on social media and work with you?
Yeah, so melodysilva.com, or I'm on social media, Tune Bucket Piano Lessons. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
I love that name, by the way. Tune Bucket. Like, I don't know. It's just every time I see it, it like makes me giggle like in a joyful way. I just think it's like something really like cute and quirky about it. So I really like the name.
Thank you. I have a little, not a rebellious streak to me, but I have a little side of me that, they say you can't carry a tune in a bucket. And I have just worked with enough. I mean, we're talking musicians who had no talent, no musical background, and they learned to play for church. So the way that we've thought about learning to play and the things that we felt like we've needed to know have just added pressure, unneeded pressure to us,
Yeah.
and have sort of kept us from following. I mean, I'm pretty passionate about this, have kept us from following God's calling for our lives. And
Mhm.
um there's just no need for those things to stand in the way anymore.
I love it. It's great. Thank you so much, Melody, for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.